For 7 years, she believed she was in love with Keanu Reeves. Every message, every promise felt real. But when she finally crossed an ocean to meet him, the man waiting at the table wasn't a movie star. He was something else. What happened next? It shattered her illusion and changed her life forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Anna lived in a quiet village tucked along the eastern edge of Hungary, where the hills rolled gently and the seasons arrived like old friends. She was 34, an artist who painted soft, moody landscapes and designed floral arrangements for a local wedding shop. Her world was small, but inside, her heart carried oceans. Years earlier, a painful breakup had left her guarded. Her ex-fiancé, once tender, had vanished after promising forever. The silence he left behind was louder than any storm. Anna buried her trust under brushstrokes and petals, building a life of quiet routine. Coffee in the morning, brushes at noon, dinner alone. Repeat. Then one winter evening, snow falling in thick sheets outside her window, she stumbled upon an interview with Keanu Reeves. It wasn't the blockbuster star that held her. It was his stillness. The way he listened. The way he spoke about grief, solitude, and kindness. He seemed familiar, like someone who had also carried invisible weight. Curious, she searched his name online. That's when she found it. A Telegram account with his photo and a verified style username. Just a quiet place, the bio read. For connection, not attention. She clicked. The first message surprised her. Thank you for being here. No pressure, no noise, just space to breathe. No fanfare, no emojis, no requests, she responded simply. I didn't think you'd reply, he wrote back. Maybe I needed to. It began like that. One message, then two, then a pattern that stretched into months. He never asked for anything. No money, no phone number, no video chats, just conversation, sometimes short, sometimes profound. Do you believe we meet people at the right time? Yes, she wrote. I believe you were meant to find me in winter. I think so too, he replied. Winter knows the value of warmth. She began to share pieces of herself, her artwork, her fears, the loneliness that clung to her even in sunlight. He responded with reflections, fragments of poetry, and gentle encouragement. You are not invisible, he once wrote. The stars envy your stillness. And her favorite, you don't need to shine for everyone, just enough to light your way. She started to print the messages, not out of obsession but reverence. She pasted them into a journal and placed it beside her bed, a quiet relic of something that felt real, so much more than fantasy. To her, it wasn't about celebrity, it was about soul. Each night, Anna would light a small candle on her windowsill and reread one of the messages. It became a ritual, not superstition, just something sacred, like keeping a lighthouse lit, just in case someone out there was still watching the sea. Over time, the voice behind the screen became more than comforting. It became steady, familiar, grounding. He told her about sunsets he had watched in silence, about memories that never left, about how grief could be a teacher if you listened long enough. And she told him about her father, who had died young, and about how she sometimes still talked to him while watering her garden. One evening, she wrote, I don't know what love looks like anymore. He replied, love isn't a shape, it's a place. And when you're there, you don't have to ask what it is. You just know you've arrived. Anna would sit for hours after those words, holding them in her chest like a prayer. And though she never asked him about the red carpets or movie sets, he would sometimes send voice notes. Calm, steady, low. I hope today was kind to you, he said once, in a soft recording that she played again and again. She'd close her eyes, hearing not a movie star but a man who saw her, really saw her. The voice on the other end never rushed, never demanded, When she once admitted she couldn't paint for weeks because she felt too empty, he wrote, "Even fields rest after harvest. You are not failing, you are refilling." Those words became a turning point. She started painting again, not for a gallery or a client, but for herself. A series of quiet portraits. One showed a girl with stars inside her hair, sitting under a sky made of forgotten words. She titled it, "Letters That Made Me Stay." She wanted to ask the question, but always held it back. Are you really Keanu? But something in her didn't want the answer. Or maybe she already had it. Because no matter the name, the voice on the other end was real. And every part of her, every ache, every dream, believed this was love. The seasons passed like chapters in a novel, and Anna's life quietly shaped itself around their conversations. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries of heartbreaks. He never missed a day. Some messages were short, a single sentence, like, "You are doing better than you think." Others read like poetry, written just for her. She stopped needing validation from the outside world. The words she received each night, tucked safely in her phone and handwritten again in her notebooks, gave her a peace nothing else ever had. Her bookshelf began to fill with journals, not stories of fame or longing, but a private garden of moments between two souls. No one else knew, not her co-workers at the tiny school where she taught part-time art, not the neighbors who often saw her walking with a sketchbook tucked beneath her arm, not even her sister, who had tried to set her up with someone local once, only to be gently turned down. Because Anna wasn't waiting for a man, she was holding space for a feeling. And even though she had never seen his face outside of movies, never had a video call or received a gift, she never doubted the connection. One winter evening, when snow draped her street in silence, she wrote, "If you're not who I think you are, I don't think it matters anymore." The reply came swiftly. "Then maybe you see me more clearly than anyone ever has." That night she lit the candle again, then pulled out her oldest journal, the first one. She ran her fingers across the faded ink of his very first message. "You are not invisible." She smiled softly. Tears didn't come from sadness anymore. They came from how deeply seen she felt, how quietly understood she had become. In a world that often overlooked her, where people rarely looked twice at the woman who always gave more than she asked for, this, whatever it was, made her feel cherished, loved. She whispered aloud into the stillness of the room, "Wherever you are, thank you." And across the ocean, something in the universe stirred, not because of magic, not because of fame, but because even the smallest lights, when held long enough, can warm the heart of someone who had almost forgotten what it felt like to be wanted for who they are. The message arrived on a quiet Sunday morning. Anna had just finished sweeping the kitchen floor when the familiar ping echoed from her phone. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. There, among the usual soft words and check-ins, was something new. "If you ever come to the US, I'd like to meet you, for real." She stared at the screen. Her heart did something strange. A slow flip, as if the air around her had shifted. For a moment, everything inside her stilled. It wasn't framed as a demand, not even a request. It was a quiet invitation, one that carried all the weight of the 7 years that had come before it. 7 years of words. 7 years of nights spent wondering if what they shared was real. 7 years of writing to someone she had never seen in the flesh. Anna's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but instead of replying, she locked the screen and set the phone down. She paced, made tea, tried to sketch, but her hand couldn't stop trembling. The word circled in her head, "Meet you. For real. For real." She looked at the travel brochures she kept tucked inside an old cigar box under her bed. Postcards of California, a brochure about national parks, a wrinkled map of Los Angeles folded so many times the creases had started to fray. She pulled them out, one by one, held them in her lap. Later that day, she opened her laptop. Her internet was slow, the connection unstable, but she waited patiently for the search bar to load. Flights from Budapest to Los Angeles. The prices were steep, layovers long, but there it was. A 3-flight journey, one from Budapest to Frankfurt, another to Chicago, then, finally, to Los Angeles. She clicked through the calendar, found a week that worked, and saw her savings account in her mind. She'd have enough, barely. She'd have to sell a few of her oil paintings, the ones she hadn't wanted to part with. She'd also have to borrow a bit from the little cushion she'd set aside in case her mother ever needed medical help again. But something inside her said now or never, that this moment had been whispering toward her for years. That night, under the yellow light of her tiny kitchen, Anna replied, "If you mean it, I'll come." His reply came almost instantly. "I've never meant anything more." The words blinked back at her on the screen, glowing softly in the dark. Anna read them again and again until her breath steadied. She pressed her palms together, closed her eyes, and whispered the same word 3 times. Yes, yes, yes. The next morning she began preparing her heart for departure. She took the framed red dress off its hanger. It had been a gift to herself 5 years ago, second-hand but beautiful. She remembered the night she sent a photo of it, shy and uncertain, to the man she believed was Keanu Reeves. He had messaged back only one sentence, "You look like fire standing still." That comment had stayed with her, not because of its flattery, but because of how it made her feel seen. Anna folded the dress carefully into her suitcase. She packed her journal, too, the thick one, the one she'd filled with handwritten quotes from their messages, sentences that had carried her through her loneliest days. She couldn't bring everything, but she brought what mattered. The next days passed like a blur. She sold 2 paintings online, one of a lighthouse, one of a boy with a paper crown. A woman from Vienna wired her a deposit. That was enough to cover the layover hotel. She called her mother, said she'd be traveling for a little while. "To where?" her mother asked gently. "Somewhere I need to go before I can grow," Anna replied. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. On the morning of her departure, the village still slept. She stood outside the tiny bus station, backpack snug against her shoulders, ticket tucked into her coat. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were steady. Each leg of the journey tested her resolve. The Frankfurt airport was a maze. Her connection in Chicago delayed. She slept on a plastic bench near Gate 37 with her arms wrapped around her bag. But none of it shook her. She thought of his words with every mile. She imagined him waiting, perhaps in a quiet corner of a restaurant with a shy smile and nervous hands. The same man who had written to her about constellations, about how grief could be a teacher, about the time he stood in the rain after his sister's diagnosis and found peace anyway. Anna stepped off the plane in Los Angeles just after sunset, and she whispered to herself, "I'm here." The terminal buzzed with noise, but Anna moved as if inside a bubble. Her boots echoed across the tile, her heart thudded a strange rhythm. Not fear, not quite excitement either. Something deeper, like reverence. She followed the signs to the arrivals curb, clutching the small handwritten note he'd sent the night before. "Table by the window, Cafe Marigold. I'll be wearing a navy sweater. See you soon, Anna." She paused before exiting the airport, her reflection caught in the glass. The long travel had left its mark. Hair tousled, skin tired, but she didn't care. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small tube of lipstick, and applied it with a trembling hand. Just enough, just in case. The cab ride was silent. The driver didn't ask questions. Anna appreciated that. Cafe Marigold was tucked on a quiet corner near downtown. It was modest. Brick walls, warm yellow lights, the hum of evening conversation spilling softly from its windows. Her suitcase rolled behind her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. She paused. She could still turn around, still leave, still retreat into the safety of imagination. But she didn't. She stepped inside, heart pounding. There were couples scattered through the room, a waitress carrying plates, a man behind the bar washing glasses. She scanned the room slowly, her eyes landing on a man by the window. He stood when he saw her, younger than she imagined. Not Keanu Reeves, but his eyes. They were kind, soft, and very real. "Are you Anna?" he asked, voice unsure, vulnerable. She nodded slowly. He took a breath. "I'm not Keanu. I'm not famous. My name is Daniel." She didn't move. "I never meant to deceive you," he said quickly. "I didn't ask for money. I saw you were hurting. I wrote because I knew what that pain felt like, and I kept writing because I started to care, really care." Anna stood frozen. Daniel looked down. "I know I'm not what you came for, but every word I wrote, I meant. I didn't want to lie. I only wanted to love you honestly." Her suitcase handle slipped from her hand. Her shoulders dropped, not in disappointment, but in something else. Relief. And just like that, the story she'd built in her head began to crumble. But maybe something more beautiful was about to begin. The restaurant sat tucked between rows of aging trees, a rustic, quiet spot with fairy lights woven through the porch rails and a small wooden sign that read, "Olive and Pine." Anna stood at the entrance for a long time before stepping inside, clutching her coat with both hands. Her heart raced louder than her footsteps on the hardwood floor. She had arrived an hour early, her nerves too restless to wait any longer. Every second that passed only sharpened the edges of her doubt. What if no one showed? What if it was all a cruel trick? What if she had made a fool of herself, crossing oceans for a ghost? A waitress greeted her kindly and led her to a small corner table near the window. From there, Anna could see the curve of the gravel driveway, the flicker of headlights in the distance, and the trees gently swaying in the wind. She wore the red dress, the same one she had sent a picture of years ago, never imagining she'd wear it for anything real. Minutes passed, then 30, then 40. He sipped ice water with shaking fingers. And then she saw him. He stepped out of a silver sedan slowly, cautiously, like someone not entirely sure how to walk into a dream. He wore a navy button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and jeans that didn't try too hard. No bodyguards, no movie star glow, just a man. Her first thought was that he was too young. Her second thought was that his eyes were impossibly kind. He walked through the door, scanning the room briefly. When his gaze met hers, something softened in his shoulders. He walked up to her table. "Are you Anna?" His voice was calm, not tentative, just real. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. He sat down gently across from her. "I'm not Keanu, not in name, not in fame, but I wrote every word, I meant every promise. I never wanted to deceive. I only wanted to love. Honestly." Anna didn't respond at first. The walls of 7 years of belief, of longing, of midnight wishes and sunlit journal pages, everything shook in a single moment. Her throat tightened, her pulse climbed. But her feet didn't move. She didn't run. She stayed, because something in her gut whispered, "Wait." Not everything real begins the way you expect. The silence between them was tender, stretched like the space between stars. He didn't fidget, he didn't rush. He let her breathe, let her feel. And that, somehow, made her trust the stillness more than any speech could. Anna's hands were clasped on the table. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why write as someone else? Why not just be you?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Because I didn't think me was enough. You were grieving. You had just lost your father. I saw your comment on a forum about how Keanu's interviews gave you hope. I wasn't trying to impersonate him. I was trying to give you comfort, in a voice you already trusted." She blinked, remembering. It was true. The first messages came right after her father's funeral. that empty winter when everything felt like fog. The man across from her leaned forward, elbows gently resting on the table. I never asked you for money. I never tried to meet you under false pretenses. I didn't want to trick you. I just wanted to keep being someone who saw you, someone who reminded you you were worth loving. I used a name that meant something to you, until maybe I could mean something too. Anna swallowed hard. Her heart was confused, but her soul was listening. I thought I was in love with Keanu Reeves, she said quietly. And maybe you were, he replied. But not for his fame, for the way he listens, for his kindness, for what he represents. She studied him, the freckles on his nose, the way his hand curled protectively around his glass of water, the stillness in his presence. It was all familiar. Not because she had seen him before, but because, without knowing it, he had been showing himself for years, through words, through poems, through quiet encouragement on dark nights. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small object, sliding it across the table. Her journal. The one she had once mailed him when she thought he was Keanu. The one filled with her dreams, her drawings, her handwritten quotes. I never opened it, he said. It was yours, sacred. I brought it back tonight because I want this next chapter to begin in truth. Anna touched the cover, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was holding something real. Anna turned the journal in her hands, tracing the frayed edges of the cover. So many nights had been poured into those pages. She'd written by candlelight, in airports, on rainy afternoons when she felt forgotten by the world. And every time she wrote, she imagined him reading it. Imagined his voice replying with understanding and grace. And now here was the truth, sitting across from her. Still kind, still quiet, still seeing her. I was never pretending to be someone famous, he said softly. I just wanted to be the kind of man who could remind you you were not alone. Anna's chest tightened. 7 years. 7 years of believing in a digital dream. And yet, right now, it didn't feel like something had shattered. It felt like something long buried was rising to the surface. She opened the journal, flipping to a random page. There, in her own handwriting, were the words he once messaged her. Even if the whole world forgets, I remember. She looked up at him. You remembered, she whispered. He nodded. They didn't eat much that night. The food went cold as time stretched and shrank, folded in on itself like memory. They talked about everything, how it started, when it changed, why he waited. I didn't want to meet you as a lie, he said. I wanted to become the kind of man who deserved the way you saw me. Anna was quiet for a long time. I thought love was about finding someone who fit a fantasy, she said. Now, I wonder if it's about finding someone who tells the truth, even if that truth breaks something. He looked down. I didn't know if you'd forgive me. I didn't either, she replied. And then she smiled. But I think I'm starting to. The restaurant slowly emptied. The candles on their table burned lower. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, a quiet reminder that the world was still moving, that seasons could still change. As they stood to leave, he reached for her coat, helping her into it with the gentleness of a man who never stopped listening. And as they stepped out into the cold, their steps matched. Not perfectly, but closely enough to begin again. The silence between them stretched like the Atlantic Ocean Anna had just crossed. Her coffee sat untouched, its steam long gone. Across from her, Michael, his real name, sat with his palms open, resting on the table. He wasn't trying to convince her, he wasn't pleading. He was simply being honest. My name is Michael Carter. I teach literature at a high school in Buffalo, he said softly. 7 years ago, I went through something hard. A breakup, a betrayal. I was lost. And I watched his face. She searched for signs of manipulation, cruelty, but all she saw was a quiet ache, the same kind that had once lived in her own bones. I started writing as Keanu, Michael continued. Not to scam, not for anything cruel. I just needed a way to speak to the world like someone kind and brave, and then you responded." He looked down, his voice catching. "You gave me someone to write to. Not a fan, a friend, a soul." Anna didn't speak. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "I never asked you for anything," Michael said, finally looking her in the eyes. "No money, no gifts. I wanted to show you the kind of love I thought Keanu would offer someone like you. Someone good. Someone hurting." The restaurant buzzed faintly in the background. A server passed by, refilling water glasses. But for Anna, the world had narrowed to this table, this man. These 7 years of beautiful, digital dreams, now folding into something real and strange and terrifying. She finally spoke. "You lied," she said. Michael nodded. "Yes, but you also never took anything." "No, I only gave—" There was a pause, heavy and unspoken. "I believed it was Keanu Reeves," Anna whispered. "And in a strange way, I'm not sure I was wrong." Michael looked confused. "Because the person you were, those messages—" She blinked back emotion. "They were real. They healed me." Michael's voice was raw. "So did yours." Tears shimmered in both their eyes, unshed but understood. For 7 years, they had shared sunrises, heartbreaks, little poems. It hadn't been built on fame or fantasy. It had been built on attention, on care, on truth beneath the mask. Anna leaned back in her chair, her heartbeat still unsure, but something in her softening. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew she wasn't ready to walk away just yet. Michael wiped his eyes and tried to smile. "I don't expect anything, Anna. I never did. I told myself if we ever met, I'd be honest, even if it cost me everything." Anna didn't respond right away. Her mind was reeling, sorting through thousands of messages, emojis, poems, and quiet comforts that had carried her through winters, heartbreaks, and years of solitude. She had fallen in love with the words, but now she was staring at the man behind them. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, he wasn't Keanu Reeves. But he had remembered every detail. Her art, her favorite tea, the Hungarian lullaby she'd once mentioned humming to herself as a child. "How did you know I wouldn't just hate you?" she asked gently. "I didn't," Michael said. "But I knew the truth would find you one day. I just hoped that the truth might be enough." Anna leaned forward, her fingers toying with the edge of the napkin in front of her. "Why me? Why keep writing to me for so long?" Michael took a deep breath. "Because when I started writing as Keanu, I thought I was helping you, but after a while, I realized it was you who was helping me. You never asked for anything either. You just believed in me, or at least in the version of me I was trying to become." She swallowed hard, her eyes glassy now. "And who are you now?" "I'm still trying to be him," he said softly. "Not Keanu the actor, but Keanu the man people believe in. The one who listens, who doesn't run from pain, who shows up." Anna blinked slowly. Her world hadn't crumbled the way she thought it would when the illusion fell away. Instead, something unexpected had taken root. Respect. She looked at him fully now. His face wasn't perfect. There was stubble on his chin and a faint scar near his temple. But there was kindness in his gaze, familiarity, warmth. "You know," she said with a small breath, "I told my best friend that if I ever met you and you turned out to be fake, I'd never forgive myself." Michael lowered his eyes. "And now?" he asked. Anna sat back, watching him with a long, unreadable gaze. "I'm trying to figure out," she said slowly, "if what I loved is still sitting across from me." Michael didn't speak, he just waited. And Anna didn't leave. Not yet. The candle between them flickered, casting long shadows across the table. Outside, the sky had dimmed into a gentle twilight. The world was quiet. It felt like they were the only two people alive in that little restaurant. Anna reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Carefully, almost ceremoniously, she laid it on the table. "I brought this with me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael glanced down. It was one of the first messages he'd sent her. She had printed it out, pressed it between pages of her journal for years. It read, "You are not invisible. I see you. And if I were the kind of man you believe in, I would spend my days reminding you that you are worth more than the silence that hurt you." He stared at the words for a long time, then lifted his gaze to hers. "I meant that," he said. "Every part of it." "I know," Anna replied. She took a sip of water, her hands no longer trembling. The storm of disbelief had passed. Now came something softer, something she didn't yet have a name for. It was like seeing a painting from a new angle. Still beautiful, just different. "You weren't Keanu," she said slowly. "But the man who wrote those words was real. He had to be. Because they healed something in me." Michael looked stunned. She continued, "And I think that's what I've been searching for all along. Not a celebrity, not a fantasy, just someone real, who knows how to see me." He blinked away tears. "And what do you see when you look at me now?" Anna smiled for the first time since walking in. "A man with a scar and kind eyes. A man who wrote poetry to a stranger because his heart needed to speak. And maybe someone brave enough to meet me when most people would have run." Michael looked down at the table, humbled. "I don't know how this ends," she said, "but I think I want to find out." He reached across the table, slowly, offering his hand. Anna placed hers in it. They didn't kiss, they didn't rush, they just held on. And in that moment, everything that was fake had fallen away. What remained was something true. Not the image of Keanu Reeves, but the kindness that his image had inspired, and the spark of something honest, finally beginning. The morning after their meeting, Anna awoke to a strange quiet. Not the kind that filled empty rooms, but the kind that lingered after something important had been said. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the night before. His words still echoed inside her. "I never wanted to deceive. I only wanted to love honestly." She sat up, heart pounding. Her suitcase was half packed in the corner. She could leave, go home, call it a strange chapter, another heartbreak in a long list of lessons. But instead she reached for her phone and typed a single message. "Breakfast?" The reply came quickly. "Already brewing coffee, name the place." They met at a small cafe near her hotel. When she arrived, he was already seated by the window, 2 mugs of coffee in front of him, steam curling like gentle question marks into the morning air. He stood as she approached, but didn't speak, just smiled. This time, Anna saw him differently, not through the lens of an illusion, but through the clarity of truth. He looked human, tired, a little scared, but kind and real. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted. "I wasn't sure either," she replied, "but I woke up thinking about one thing." He raised his eyebrows gently. "You never asked for anything. Not once. 7 years, and never once did you try to take something from me." He looked down at his coffee. "Except your trust." There was silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. After breakfast, they took a walk through a quiet park nearby. The trees had begun to change color, reds, golds, soft rustling above them. Anna listened as he told her his real name. Michael. A literature teacher, 35. Lived alone, no pets, no wife, no secrets, at least not anymore. He explained how the Telegram account started during a time when he felt invisible. He admired Keanu's interviews, his integrity, and wanted to carry that energy into conversations. So he began writing. First to strangers, then to her. And somehow, he said, you became the person I was writing to, even when I wasn't sure who I was. Anna stopped walking. She turned to him. You wrote like a man in love with the world." He nodded, quietly. "I was writing to someone who made it worth loving again." She didn't know what to say. But she didn't walk away. She kept walking beside him. Over the next few days, something delicate began to form between them. Not the thrill of a fairy tale, but the slow, steady blooming of trust. They visited bookstores, shared pastries on rainy benches, spoke about childhood dreams, unspoken fears, and the strange beauty of starting over. Michael showed her the classroom where he taught. The walls were lined with student drawings and quotes from authors Anna had loved since she was a girl. One in particular caught her eye, taped above the chalkboard in neat handwriting. "You are not invisible," she gasped, reaching out to touch it. "You wrote that to me in the second year, after I told you I felt unseen." Michael nodded. "And I meant it, then and now." Anna didn't speak, but she looked at him. Really looked. No illusions, no borrowed names. Just this man standing in front of her, offering nothing but honesty and a memory he never thought would matter this much. By the end of the week, she moved out of the hotel and into a short-term rental nearby, just to explore more, she told herself. But her heart knew the truth. They didn't rush anything, no declarations, no pressure. Just two people walking into each other's world slowly, like learning the steps of a quiet dance. On their 15th day together, they cooked dinner at Michael's apartment. She made goulash the way her grandmother taught her. He made too much rice. They laughed at the disaster and ate everything anyway. Afterward, he brought out an old record player and put on a jazz album she'd never heard before. "I've never danced," Anna admitted. "Neither have I," he smiled, "but we're both here now." They danced, awkwardly, gently, bare feet on the wooden floor, her head on his shoulder, his breath steadying her. It wasn't magic. It was better than that. It was real. And somewhere between that song and the quiet that followed, Anna realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the truth, not of tomorrow, not of the road ahead. Later that night, as they sat together watching the lights from the city skyline blink in and out like stars, Michael turned to her and asked, "If I had been honest from the start, do you think we would have made it here?" Anna leaned her head on his shoulder. "No," she said softly, "because I had to find my way through the dream, to get to the truth." Months passed, like chapters in a book they were both writing. After Anna returned to Hungary briefly to settle her affairs, she came back with a suitcase, a canvas roll of her paintings, and a heart wide open. They rented a small apartment in upstate New York, modest, sunlit, with creaky floors and mismatched dishes. Every corner of it was filled with beginnings. Her sketchbooks lay beside his coffee mugs. His worn-out teaching bag shared space with her brushes and acrylics. They found rhythm in routines, cooking together, folding laundry, tending to a tomato plant that stubbornly refused to bloom. Anna began painting again, with passion she hadn't felt in years. Michael, ever her cheerleader, cleared a space by the window so she could work with natural light. One day she painted him, not as the man she once imagined, but as the man who had shown up. In her portrait, he sat beneath a tree, not smiling, not posing, just present. He cried when he saw it. "I never thought I could be someone worth painting," he whispered. "You are," she said, "because you stayed." A year after their first meeting, they were married in a quiet ceremony at a park not far from their apartment. Just a few close friends, a minister, and the simple sound of birdsong in the background. She wore the same red dress, the one she'd packed in hope. He wore a red tie to match. When they exchanged vows, there was no mention of the name that once brought them together, no shadow of the 7 years that led to that moment, only the words they had come to know by heart, words like honesty, grace, and presence. After the ceremony, they walked hand in hand along a dirt trail near the lake. The wind was gentle, the trees swayed as if blessing their new chapter. Anna looked up at him and smiled. "I still can't believe it," she said. "Believe what?" "The story I thought I was writing turned out even better." Michael kissed her forehead. because this time, it's ours. And so it was. Not the love story she expected, but the one that mattered. The one that grew from truth, forgiveness, and the kind of kindness that lives long after the screen goes dark. The kind of love that doesn't borrow someone else's name to exist. It simply is. The morning sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains as Anna sat curled in a worn armchair, one hand holding a cup of chamomile tea, the other resting on the soft linen of her journal. Across the room, Michael stood by the window, watching the street come alive with morning joggers, barking dogs, and the occasional bicyclist weaving through it all. A year had passed since their first real meeting, but some mornings still felt like a dream. That morning, neither of them spoke for a while. Words weren't always necessary now. Michael finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking. I want to write him." Anna looked up. "You mean Keanu?" Michael nodded. Not to explain, not to confess, just to thank him. Anna set her cup down and nodded slowly. "Yes, me too." There was something poetic, even reverent about the idea. A letter not for fame, not for forgiveness, but for gratitude. They owed something intangible to a man who'd never met them. A man who unknowingly modeled how to love through silence, decency, and small acts of compassion. Because of that image, Michael had chosen tenderness over impulse, and Anna had dared to believe that love didn't have to wound. They began the letter that same afternoon. It wasn't ornate or flowery. They didn't over-explain. It was quiet, like the man himself. "Dear Mr. Reeves, you don't know us, and we don't expect you to. But over the past few years, your quiet strength and kindness changed 2 lives you'll never meet. This isn't fan mail. It's something more sacred. A thank you for helping shape what love could look like. Because of you, a man learned how to speak from the soul, not to pretend, but to mean it. And because of you, a woman who once lost faith in love found her heart again. You didn't build this story, but you inspired it from 2 people who found each other through the shadow of your grace. Thank you." Anna and Michael. When they finished writing, Anna took a deep breath and folded the paper neatly. She slipped it into an envelope, added an international stamp, and together they walked it to the mailbox down the block. They didn't expect a reply, and they didn't need one. What mattered most had already been said. The next morning, Anna found herself staring at the small wooden frame on their bookshelf, the one that held a quote clipped from one of Keanu's earliest messages: "Be kind, always." Beneath it, in smaller print, Michael had added, "It's how I found her." She smiled and traced the edge of the frame with her fingers. That quote had been there from the beginning, in the earliest exchanges, the line that made her pause and reread the message over and over again, back when she still wasn't sure who, or what, was on the other side of the screen. It had anchored her through late nights, moments of doubt, even when the world felt too wide and her place in it too small. Now it hung in their home, not as a souvenir from a fantasy, but as a badge of how far they'd come. Later that week, Michael suggested they visit a small bookstore cafe just outside of town. As they sat tucked into a corner booth, sipping lattes and watching college students scribble in notebooks, Anna noticed something she hadn't expected. Another woman sitting alone with a phone, smiling down at her screen, lips moving slightly, as if in a conversation. Anna didn't interrupt, but something in her heart stirred. After they left, she turned to Michael and said softly, "There are so many people like I used to be, lonely, believing, hoping." Michael nodded. "That's why we wrote him, and maybe, someday, we'll find ways to help others like us." In that moment, a new dream began forming, not born out of illusion or need, but out of a shared desire to turn what they'd experienced into something healing for others. That evening, they began brainstorming a small blog, something honest and gentle, a space where people could talk about real connection, hope, healing, and the strange paths love sometimes takes. They called it the real story. The first post, their own story. They didn't name Keanu. They didn't need to. They simply titled it, "How One Man's Integrity Inspired Two Strangers to Find Each Other." It was quiet, humble, just like the one who sparked it. And just like the love they'd found, unexpected, but real. Weeks later, as spring unfolded around their quiet home, Anna received a plain envelope in the mail. No return address, just her name written in neat handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a card. On the front, a black and white photo of a typewriter. Inside, just 2 lines. "Your words reached me. Thank you for choosing kindness over anger." No signature, no fanfare. Just that. She didn't need confirmation. Something in the tone, the humility, it mirrored everything she admired. If it wasn't Keanu himself, it was someone who understood his spirit deeply. Either way, it was enough. He placed the card in the same journal that held the original printed messages, the ones she had collected over 7 years. Not as proof of a fantasy, but as reminders of the path that led her here. She had lived through illusion, through revelation, through heartbreak, and still, somehow, she had found peace. She and Michael framed a photo together in the kitchen, just the two of them, holding hands, standing in front of a quiet lake where they had gone camping that summer. Below it, a small engraving. "Real love begins where pretense ends." It wasn't about pretending anymore. It wasn't about famous names or borrowed identities. It was about the daily acts of choosing one another, of rebuilding trust, brick by brick, of holding space for the messy, honest parts of love. They didn't hide how they met. When friends asked, they told the truth, softly, with smiles that said, "We know it sounds strange," but with hearts that no longer needed to justify how the journey looked. Because in the end, what mattered wasn't how the story began. It was that it led to love. And it was love born from something real, not glittering, not flawless, but grounded in the values one actor quietly embodied through his life: sincerity, gentleness, and grace. Anna looked at the bookshelf again that night. There were no movie posters, no autographs, just one quote in the center, framed in gold leaf paper. "Be kind, always." She didn't know if Keanu ever saw their letter, but she knew his spirit had already done its part. Anna never planned to share her story with the world. For a long time, her journal had been her most private possession. A cloth-bound book filled with carefully taped printed messages, handwritten reflections, and little sketches she made during those long nights waiting for a ping on her phone. It had pages stained with tea and tears, verses underlined in red, and little stars in the margins beside phrases that once made her heart soar. She had written in it faithfully, not knowing she was documenting the biggest transformation of her life. After their wedding, Michael found her flipping through it one evening. He sat beside her in silence, watching as her fingers brushed over one particular message. "You are not invisible. The stars envy your stillness." It had been her favorite. She'd once believed those words were from a movie star, but now she knew they had come from the heart of a man who had been quietly loving her from afar, in his own honest way. "You should let people read it," Michael said gently. "There's something in those pages that's bigger than us." Anna hesitated at first. It felt strange, exposing something so raw, so personal. But over the next few months, she began transcribing it, page by page, into a document on her laptop. She included her memories, her doubts, the dreams that had almost broken her, and the truth that had rebuilt her. When it was finished, she titled it, "Messages from the Wrong Man." The publisher didn't even blink. Within weeks, they accepted the manuscript and moved fast to publish it as a memoir. They said it was one of the most human and tender love stories they'd ever read. The book came out quietly. No fanfare, no TV appearances, just a few small features online, a single post on her new blog, and a digital listing on major platforms. And then, the world found it. Within days, hundreds of women began messaging her. Some were older, divorced, or widowed. Some were in long-distance relationships. Some had been catfished. Some had been healed. They wrote long, vulnerable emails thanking her for telling a story that felt strangely close to their own. She hadn't written it for attention. She had written it because it was the only way she knew how to honor what had been real inside a fantasy. The response was overwhelming and deeply personal. Within weeks, Anna was invited to speak at a local women's reading circle in upstate New York. Then another. Soon, she was joining virtual discussions hosted by international book clubs, psychology podcasts, and relationship healing groups. She never pretended to have all the answers, but what she had was something rare, the lived experience of rediscovering truth in the ashes of illusion. At one event, a woman in her 60s stood up and said, "Your book didn't make me feel foolish. It made me feel human." Another added, "I didn't think I could ever forgive myself for believing a lie, but you helped me see. It wasn't about the lie. It was about the longing behind it." Those words stayed with Anna for days. The longing behind it. That had been her too, sitting alone at her kitchen table after painting, waiting for her phone to light up. Not because she needed fame, but because she needed to feel seen. And Michael had seen her, even if he used a borrowed name to open the door. What made Anna's message resonate was that she never condemned herself or others for wanting love. She didn't demonize technology or blame people for being vulnerable. Her message was simple but powerful. Sometimes the wrong name leads you to the right soul. One podcast host asked her during a live interview, "If you could go back and never answer that first message, would you?" Anna smiled softly, her hand resting near her heart. "No, I wouldn't change anything. I didn't fall in love with Keanu Reeves. I fell in love with the words that held me when I was lonely. And the man who wrote them, no matter the name, turned out to be everything I never knew I needed." Behind the screen, Michael watched the live stream from their living room, quietly emotional. He wasn't the one on stage, he never wanted to be. But hearing Anna speak her truth with such grace reminded him that their story had become more than a private connection. It had become a testament, not to fame, not to fantasy, but to the kind of love that lives quietly between the lines. And that, he thought, was exactly what Keanu Reeves would have hoped for, too. As the months passed, Anna's memoir became more than just a viral story. It became a quiet revolution. Readers began sending her letters from all over the world. Some were typed, some handwritten, some only a few lines long. A woman in Brazil wrote, "Your book made me open up about a relationship I kept secret for years." A young man in Singapore said, "I pretended to be someone else online once. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just didn't think anyone would love the real me. Your story helped me come clean." One letter came in from a 17-year-old girl in France who had lost her father. "When I read the part where you said the heart behind the message was the real part, it made me cry. I needed to believe someone could see me, even if I didn't see myself yet." Anna took every message to heart. She kept a folder on her desk labeled Letters of Light. Each one reminded her that her vulnerability had become someone else's guidepost. And in a world drowning in surface-level noise, her truth had cut through, gently but powerfully. Michael noticed the difference too, not just in how others saw Anna, but in how Anna saw herself. She stood taller now, not because of fame or attention, but because her pain had found purpose. She had rewritten her story, and in doing so, given others permission to do the same. They started getting invited to joint interviews, the real couple behind messages from the wrong man. Michael never felt the need to defend himself anymore. He let Anna speak. When asked why he wrote for so long under a false name, he always said the same thing. "Because I didn't think I'd be enough as myself, but I was wrong." That answer didn't spark judgment, it sparked compassion. And slowly, a new understanding took root in people's hearts. That connection, when honest and patient, could survive anything, even its own origin story. One evening, as Anna looked out the window at the dusky skyline, she whispered to Michael, "Maybe this story was never meant to be perfect. Maybe it was meant to be real." Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulder, and real is the best kind of forever. From that moment on, they stopped chasing the illusion of a flawless love story because they had already written the one that mattered. And it began, not with truth or lies, but with listening. There was a time when Anna believed love was a path that everyone else got to walk, but not her. Long before she ever heard from the man she believed was Keanu, her heart had already known the weight of abandonment. She had once been engaged. His name was Istvan, and he was charming in all the ways that fooled everyone, including her. They met in a small gallery in Budapest, where Anna had displayed 3 oil paintings. He told her she painted like she had seen another world, and for the first time in years, she believed she could be understood. But 2 months before their wedding, Istvan confessed he had fallen in love with someone else. Anna remembered the sound of that moment more than the words. The silence after, the cold cup of tea in her hands, the ring still on her finger. She didn't paint for nearly a year after that. Instead, she stayed in the village, helping her mother and walking the hills that surrounded their small home. She spoke less, she trusted less, but she wrote. Short reflections in a brown leather journal. Little things. Observations. Prayers. Wishes. She never expected anyone to read, and it was in that quiet life that a new kind of voice reached her. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Michael sat in the aftermath of his own heartbreak. His marriage had ended 2 years earlier, not with cruelty, but with erosion. Words that used to matter lost their weight. The laughter had faded first, then the eye contact. By the time the divorce was final, there wasn't anger, just silence. The kind that makes you question whether love was ever real or simply convenient. Michael lost his father the same year, a sudden stroke. There was no goodbye, no closure. He went from being someone's son and someone's husband to being no one's anything. He filled his days with teaching and his nights with podcasts and old movies. The news was always too loud. His thoughts were always too quiet. And one night, after watching an old Keanu interview where the actor talked about grief and the beauty of stillness, Michael created the Telegram account. Not to impersonate, not to trick, but to speak like someone he admired, someone who carried pain and kindness together, someone who didn't flinch when life got heavy, someone Anna needed, and maybe someone he needed to become. When Anna read Michael's first message, disguised as Keanu, it felt like wind moving through a sealed room. She had been suffocating in stillness, and suddenly there was presence. Attention. Words that didn't demand anything. Words that simply saw her. She responded cautiously at first, thinking it couldn't possibly be real, but when no requests for money came, no strange links or questions for personal documents, she let herself believe. Maybe not that it was truly Keanu Reeves, but that someone, somewhere, was willing to speak to her like she mattered. Michael, on his end, was just as tentative. He never once wrote in capital letters, never once exaggerated or flirted inappropriately. He simply sent thoughts like postcards, lines like, "Have you noticed how silence sometimes says more than 1,000 apologies? And the world teaches you to chase noise, but peace, that's where the real power lives." Anna copied every message into her journal, not because she thought it would lead to romance, but because for the first time since Istvan, someone was communicating with her soul, not her appearance. Michael never expected replies that long, but Anna's responses read like poetry. She described colors of sunsets in her village, the smell of freshly baked bread from her neighbor's window, the memory of her father teaching her how to ride a bicycle near the train tracks. They never discussed politics, never argued. They talked about death and beauty and why some people can't say "I miss you" until it's too late. Over time, something inside both of them shifted. They didn't know each other's real names, not yet, but they knew how each other thought, what each other feared, what helped each other fall asleep. In many ways, the mask Michael wore wasn't to deceive, it was a container, a voice he borrowed until he had enough courage to speak as himself. Anna, in turn, didn't fall for the image. Not really. She fell for the slowness, the intentionality, the quiet reminders that she was still a woman with a heart that deserved gentleness. Years later, sitting side by side in their little kitchen, Anna once told Michael something that made him tear up without warning. "I wasn't in love with Keanu Reeves. I was in love with who you let yourself become when you wrote to me like him." That was the night Michael finally threw away the burner phone. He didn't need the mask anymore. He had become the man behind it. The evening sky outside their home in upstate New York was streaked with soft purples and gold. Anna sat on the porch steps, her feet tucked beneath her, sipping warm tea. Inside, Michael was cleaning the dinner dishes, humming a slow tune she recognized from one of their earliest conversations, a song she'd mentioned loving years ago. He remembered everything. She glanced at the journal in her lap, the old one, the one she once carried across oceans, across fear, the one that held her heart before it had a name for hope again. She opened it to the page with the first message he ever sent. "You are not invisible." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the strange, full ache of knowing how far they'd come. From deception to devotion, from imagined to real, from longing to life. Inside the house, Michael reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn envelope. He stepped outside and handed it to her. "I wrote this the night before we met," he said, quietly. Anna took it in her hands and opened it slowly. In his handwriting, a single paragraph. "If I lose you forever because of what I'm about to tell you, I'll carry that pain. But if there's even a chance that truth might lead to something real, then I'd rather meet you honestly and be loved a little than be worshipped behind a lie." She covered her mouth with one hand, holding the letter close to her chest. In that moment she saw him, not as the man who once borrowed someone else's voice, but as the man who learned to speak his own. Not as the man who had once hidden, but as the man who now stood beside her every day, completely seen. Their pasts didn't match. Their pain wasn't the same. But it had carved them into the kind of people who don't take love lightly. They had met in the strangest way, through illusion, through yearning. But now, they were building something real, with garden soil under their nails, with burnt toast on Monday mornings, with morning walks and handwritten notes on the fridge. Sometimes, dreams don't arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes they come disguised as someone else's face. But if we're lucky, truly lucky, they transform, not into what we imagined, but into what we always needed. And when that happens, the illusion fades, but the love, it stays. The autumn morning was quiet. The sun peeked through the kitchen window, tracing golden lines along the edge of the wooden table. Anna stood barefoot, a cup of tea warming her palms when the envelope slid through the mail slot. It was ordinary, no stamps of royalty or fanfare, just a white envelope, addressed by hand in careful, slanted print. She opened it with a butter knife, expecting a bill or flyer. But inside was a small, cream-colored card. Tucked into it, a single typed message. No letterhead, no logo, just a note. "Sometimes the love we inspire is greater than the love we live. Wishing you peace and poetry." Anna didn't move. Her breath caught. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. She wasn't expecting this. Not from him. Not after everything. She had never asked Keanu Reeves for a reply. When she and Michael sent that letter months ago, just to thank you for unknowingly helping them find each other, it was more symbolic than anything, a gesture of closure. But this was acknowledgement, not of fame, not of fiction, but of the truth they'd lived. The words were short, but they carried weight, not just because of who sent them, but because of what they meant. Michael came into the room. "You okay?" Anna looked up at him, eyes full. He wrote back. Michael stepped closer. "He did?" She nodded and handed him the card. As he read it, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Mills held out his hand. "But he did," Anna whispered, "and that's why it matters." They stood together in the soft morning light, holding the note between them, neither one needing to say much more. It wasn't about validation. It wasn't about celebrity. It was about kindness. Coming full circle. Later that day, Anna placed the note on the mantel beside her wedding photo. It sat between a dried red rose and the leather-bound journal that once held 7 years' worth of digital dreams. She didn't frame it, not yet. She wanted to feel the paper, touch it with her fingers every now and then, remember that even the simplest kindnesses could shift a life's course. She and Michael went for a walk that evening. The sky was painted in soft lavender and rose gold. Autumn leaves swirled across the sidewalk as if stirred by something invisible but deeply alive. Neither spoke much until they reached the little bookstore where they first shared their favorite poems aloud. "You know," Michael said quietly, "he didn't write back because of who we are. He wrote back because of who he is." Anna nodded. "That's the part that breaks me open." She looked up at him with soft certainty. "Do you think he knows how much good he's done? Without even knowing it?" "I think he suspects," Michael replied, "but I also think maybe he needed to hear it too." That struck Anna. Maybe the note wasn't just for them. Maybe it was Keanu's quiet way of saying thank you for being the kind of love his words had always tried to imagine. Maybe they had reflected something back to him, a reminder that the ripples of what we say, what we do, don't end with us. As they passed a little girl skipping along the sidewalk with her mother, Anna smiled. "Michael, yeah? I don't think I believe in soulmates anymore." Michael blinked, surprised. "I think I believe in soul mirrors," she continued. "People who reflect the very best parts of you, who see past your flaws, who speak to your wounds without asking for anything in return." Michael took her hand. "And you think he saw that in you?" She looked at him with a gentle laugh. "No, I think you did, and because of that, now I see it in myself." That night, as the house settled into stillness, Anna sat by the window with a cup of tea, the letter from Keanu resting on her lap. She traced the initials again, K.R. No flourish, no added line, just simple type on clean white paper. It was everything she had imagined the real Keanu Reeves to be: quiet, intentional, and deeply sincere. She opened her journal to the final page, the one she had left blank for years, unsure how to close a story that had begun with wonder and wandered into something she never saw coming. She picked up her pen and began to write. "I thought I was falling in love with a movie star, but what I was really falling into was healing, was truth, was something waiting in the quiet to show me that love, real love, doesn't need fame or fiction. It just needs presence. It just needs a heart that means it." She paused, then added below it, "And today I finally understand. It was never about Keanu Reeves. It was about the kind of love he stood for, and the kind of love we chose to become." She closed the book gently and set it beside the letter. Then she stood, walked over to the bookshelf, and placed both the journal and the note in the same wooden box Michael had once given her on their first Christmas together. He had carved a quote on the inside lid. It read, "Be kind, always." Later, as she slipped into bed beside her husband, she whispered, "He saw us. Somehow, he saw us." Michael turned to her, kissed her forehead, and replied, "Because love like this doesn't stay hidden forever. It finds a way." Outside, the moonlit sky stretched wide and open, echoing the stillness in Anna's heart. For the first time in her life, she no longer needed to dream about the kind of love she longed for. She was living it, and a single typed letter, signed only with two letters. K.R. was the final thread that stitched her heart closed in the most beautiful way. It was exactly 1 year to the day since Anna stepped off that plane and walked into the restaurant that changed her life. Now she stood in the hallway of a home she once never dreamed she'd share with anyone, let alone the man who now waited in the living room with a smile only she could decode. She had just returned from her part-time teaching job, carrying a bag of takeout and humming softly to herself. It had been a good day, simple, grounded, the kind of day she used to wish for during those long nights alone in Hungary, staring at her phone and rereading messages she had memorized years ago. "Michael," she called out lightly, setting down the bag, but the house was quiet, too quiet. A trail of soft candlelight flickered down the hallway, leading her gently forward. That's when she saw it. Mounted on the wall of their shared office was a large wooden frame, elegant, carefully crafted, and gleaming beneath the overhead light. Inside the glass hung her red dress, the one she had packed so carefully, the one she had worn that very first night, the one he had once complimented in a message that read, "Red suits your courage." Below the framed dress was a brass plaque, engraved in quiet letters, "This is what hope looks like." Anna froze. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling instantly. She stepped closer, almost afraid to touch the glass, as if breaking the stillness would break the moment. But it didn't. It held steady, just like the love that had led her here. Footsteps padded softly behind her. Michael stood in the doorway, not saying a word. She turned around slowly. "You kept it?" "I never let go of it," he said, quietly. Her voice caught in her throat. The air was thick with memory. 7 years of waiting, of dreaming, of almost giving up, and now here it was, tangible, framed, eternal. Tears slipped down her cheeks. He reached for her hand. "Come with me," he said, gently guiding her toward the living room. The living room lights had been dimmed, replaced by the warm flicker of a few candles placed thoughtfully around the space. The curtains were pulled back, revealing the night sky above their small backyard, stars scattered like notes on sheet music. The room was quiet. No music, no television, no distractions. Anna followed him in silence, still feeling the echo of the framed dress in her chest. Every step was heavier than it should have been, as if her body understood she was walking through a memory that had finally become real. In the center of the room, Michael turned to face her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply extended his hand. She looked at him, then placed her own gently into his. He pulled her closer, slowly, carefully, like a man holding something sacred. Her head rested just beneath his chin, his arms wrapped around her back, steady and warm, her eyes closed. And then they danced. No music played, but they didn't need it. The rhythm was in their breathing, the melody was in their heartbeat. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of everything they'd been through. Every late-night message, every doubt, every forgiven truth, every choice to stay. They swayed back and forth, two shadows stitched together by something neither fame nor fantasy could offer. Realness. "I thought I was coming to meet a movie star," she whispered into his shirt, "but I found something better." His lips brushed her temple. "I only became real the day you walked in wearing that dress." She laughed through her tears. It was a quiet, grateful sound, a sound that had once lived only in the pages of her journal, written in imaginary futures that now stood right in front of her, holding her like she was the most honest thing in the world. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, they kept dancing. No rush, no pretending. Just the red dress in the next room, framed behind glass. And two people who had finally learned that the best stories aren't written by perfect beginnings. They're lived through imperfect, beautiful truth. Later that night, after the candles had melted down and the room had fallen into a soft hush, Anna sat on the couch, her bare feet tucked beneath her. She looked across the room at the framed red dress, now bathed in the golden glow of a floor lamp. The fabric shimmered slightly, as if it remembered the dreams sewn into its seams. Michael returned with 2 mugs of tea, hers chamomile, his peppermint. He handed hers to her, brushing a kiss against her forehead as he sat beside her. They didn't speak for a long time. The kind of silence between them wasn't new. It was built on comfort, on knowing. "I still can't believe it sometimes," she said softly, eyes on the frame. He followed her gaze. "What part?" "That we're here, that you were the words, that I wasn't crazy." "You were never crazy," he said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You were just brave enough to believe." She leaned into him. "It's strange, isn't it? The red dress. It started as something I wore to impress a fantasy. Now it's the symbol of something far more real." Michael nodded. "That's why I framed it. Not because it's beautiful, but because you were." Tears welled in her eyes again, not from sadness, but from the fullness of it all. The journey, the honesty, the fact that love had found them not through perfection or ease, but through honesty and choice. Outside, the wind stirred again. A branch tapped the window gently, like a quiet knock from the universe, reminding them both. "You made it." Anna sipped her tea. "When I first dreamed of meeting you, I thought it would be cameras and red carpets. But this... tea, quiet. This little moment right now. It's better." He didn't say anything. He just reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers between hers. On the wall behind them, the red dress glowed. Beneath it, the words Michael had engraved on a small brass plate gleamed in the light. "This is what hope looks like." And sitting there in the stillness, Anna realized something. She hadn't fallen in love with a name. She had fallen in love with the way that name made her feel, seen, heard, valued. And now, for the first time in her life, those feelings weren't coming from a screen. They were sitting right beside her, breathing, holding her hand, and loving her back. Michael sat at his desk, the same one where, years ago, he'd sent the very first message to Anna. Back then, it had been innocent, a way to feel less invisible during his lowest point, a channel through which he could give kindness, even if he borrowed the name of someone who symbolized it. But now, the account felt like a tether to a version of himself that no longer existed. Anna stood behind him, arms loosely folded, her presence quiet and steady. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She knew what this moment meant. Michael opened the Telegram app. The screen lit up. Their old chat thread was still pinned at the top with thousands of messages. Memories spanning 7 years. He scrolled briefly, past a poem he once wrote about winter, past her reply about how it reminded her of her childhood in the snow, past his "good morning sunshine" greetings, past the nights they talked about grief, about loneliness, about the ache of wanting to be seen. His thumb hovered over the delete account option. A small notification appeared. "Are you sure?" He looked up at Anna. Her eyes met his. No judgment, just love. He took a breath and clicked yes. The screen dimmed. The account vanished. A strange silence filled the room. Not empty, but weightless, like something had been carried out of them both. Anna walked forward and slipped her hand into his. "You okay?" she asked softly. Michael nodded. "I thought it would hurt more, but I think it was already gone. The version of me who needed that." She smiled. "He served his purpose. He found me, then you found me. Now, we start fresh." He looked down at their joined hands. "You know, for years I was terrified the truth would destroy everything. But it didn't," she said. "Because what you gave me was never a lie. It was your heart, just waiting for the right name to wear." Outside the window, the day was ending. Sunlight slanted through the trees, spilling golden shadows across the floor. Michael leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for seeing me, even before I had the courage to be fully seen." Anna whispered, "It's not who you were that I loved. It's who you are when you're with me." Later that evening, they went for a walk through their neighborhood. The kind of quiet suburb where porch lights flickered on gently and the breeze carried the scent of pine and cut grass. Michael's hand still felt warm in hers, even as the air cooled with nightfall. They didn't speak much, just shared glances and small smiles. At one point, Anna paused under a maple tree. Its branches arched overhead, creating a canopy of rustling amber leaves. She looked up. I used to think letting go meant losing something, but maybe it's just clearing space for what's real. Michael leaned beside her against the tree. When I was pretending to be him, I thought I was doing it for you. But now I know. I was doing it because I didn't believe I was enough on my own. You were, she said. You always were. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The last printed message from that old Telegram account. He'd kept it tucked away for years. I saved this, he said, just in case I ever forgot how we started. Anna unfolded it. It was simple. You are not invisible. She traced the words with her fingertips. I used to cry after reading this, she whispered, because no one had ever said it to me like that. And even if it was written under someone else's name, it still found its way to me. Michael took the paper, folded it again, and walked over to a nearby bench. He placed it gently under a loose stone near the base of the bench. What are you doing? Anna asked, smiling curiously. Leaving it for the next person who might need it, he said. Maybe a stranger will find it. Maybe no one ever will. But the words are out there now. Anna stepped closer, rested her head against his shoulder. They stood there a long while, two people who had met in the strangest, most improbable way, now tethered by something stronger than illusion. When they turned back toward home, the sidewalk shimmered with fallen leaves. The stars began to blink through the velvet sky. Michael felt lighter, not because he had erased the past, but because he had honored it, learned from it, and let it rest. That night, Michael sat alone in the small study they'd turned into a writing room. The glow from his laptop lit the walls lined with books and old photos, some of his childhood, others now of Anna. On the desk sat a cup of lukewarm tea, a worn notebook, and his phone. He stared at the telegram icon one final time. For years it had been a lifeline, a secret identity, a place where he could pour out his soul without fear, without expectation. He'd used it to build a bridge between two people who, against all odds, found each other across oceans and truths. He tapped the icon. The screen opened. A flood of memories surged, thousands of messages exchanged over years, quotes, reflections, bad jokes, lines of comfort sent across time zones. He scrolled to the very first message. Hello, Anna. I'm not much for small talk, but I believe in kindness. He closed his eyes. Then he tapped delete account. A warning popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this account? All messages will be permanently erased. He hovered, then typed, yes. The screen went blank, then closed. And just like that, the illusion was gone. Michael sat back in his chair, not sad, not relieved, just still, like a door had gently closed. Not slammed shut, not locked away, but simply finished its time. Anna appeared at the doorway. She'd been watching quietly, giving him space. Did it hurt? She asked softly. Michael nodded. A little, but not like I'd thought it would. She walked in and knelt beside him, resting her head against his arm. I never needed that version of you, she whispered. Not really. I needed the man who sat across from me at dinner, nervous and trembling but honest. I needed the one who sends handwritten notes now, not copied poems. I needed this. He leaned down, kissed the top of her head, and whispered back, I needed you to see me. They stayed there together for a long time. No masks, no screen names, no shadows between them, only the kind of silence that speaks volumes. And the truth that sometimes you have to let go of a version of yourself to fully become the one someone else already believes in. Michael sat in front of the community board's folding table, his laptop open and his notes stacked beside a half-empty cup of tea. The flyer pinned behind him read, "Digital Empathy, Healing in a Connected Age." The local library had offered a room once a month, and that's all he needed. There were no cameras, no flashy slides, just a circle of chairs and honest conversations. At first, only 6 people showed up. A grandmother curious about what her grandson was doing online, a college student recovering from a toxic online relationship, a divorced man who admitted he hadn't looked someone in the eyes in months. Michael didn't begin by talking about deception or identity. He started by asking one question. What's one message you've always wished someone would send you? There was silence. Then someone said, "I'm proud of you." Another, "You are enough." Michael nodded. Those are the ones that matter. The rest, they're just noise. He shared his story carefully, not naming names or details, but making sure they understood the heart of it. How loneliness can wrap itself in voices, how the need to be seen can lead to both beauty and confusion, and how the answer was never pretending, but presence. He called it heartline communication, the ability to speak from one's inner truth, even in digital spaces. "We don't have to be perfect to be real," he said. "We just have to show up with kindness, even through a screen." Meanwhile, Anna watched from the back of the room, a quiet smile on her face. She never spoke during those workshops. She didn't need to. Her art began to speak for her. At home, Anna had cleared a space in the sunroom, her studio once more. Her brushes had dusted for too long. Now they moved again, dipped in the softest colors, sharpened in bolder lines. Her first painting was large, 4 feet tall, 3 wide. It showed a man, faceless, standing in front of a mirror. But in the reflection was a heart, not anatomically correct, but glowing, full. The canvas shimmered slightly under the morning light. She titled it "The Mirror of Truth." When she finished it, she didn't ask for anyone's opinion. She simply hung it above their fireplace. Michael came home that night and stood in front of it for a long time. "You painted me," he whispered. Anna shook her head gently. "I painted all of us." Anna's art began to travel. First, small galleries picked up her pieces, ones with gentle names like "Stillness Doesn't Mean Silence" and "Hands That Never Let Go." She didn't paint for profit. She painted because her heart needed a language words couldn't always provide. One piece in particular caught unexpected attention. It was a smaller canvas, only 12 by 12 inches. A simple depiction of 2 figures sitting back to back, eyes closed, phones in hand. The light from their screens connected in the center, forming the faint outline of a shared heart. She titled it "Connected Anyway." When a local reporter visited Michael's workshop for a short segment on community wellness, she saw the piece and asked about it. Anna hesitated, then nodded. She agreed to a short interview, not as a survivor of deception, but as someone who had learned to see love in its realest form. Her words echoed online after the article went up. "I thought I was falling in love with a celebrity, but what I truly needed was a mirror for my own loneliness. The person who showed up for me was flawed, real, honest. That's the kind of love I now believe in." The quote spread. People around the world shared it, not because it was dramatic, but because it was deeply, achingly human. Michael's workshops began to fill, not because he promised transformation, but because he promised honesty. People sat in circles, talking about grief, disappointment, unmet expectations, and quiet healing. Some admitted to having lived double lives online. Others had been victims of emotional catfishing. Michael never judged. He offered one message, again and again. You can begin again, and you don't need to pretend to do it. He never framed himself as an expert, just someone who had learned, painfully, how costly illusion can be, and how freeing it is to live in truth. In the evenings, when the day's stories weighed heavy, he'd come home and sit in the sunroom with Anna. She'd be working on her next canvas, humming softly, the scent of lavender rising from her diffuser. They rarely talked about the past now. It didn't need retelling. They were living their second beginning, one built not from fantasy, but from faith, in the power of showing up, in the quiet courage it takes to be fully known, in the rarest kind of connection, one born in truth and nurtured by kindness. The day Anna unveiled her painting, The Mirror of Truth, the community center was quiet. Just a small gathering of local artists, educators, and a few friends. No red carpet, no speeches. Just a simple wooden easel standing near the window, sunlight washing over it like grace. The piece showed a man standing in front of a mirror, but in the reflection, he didn't see his face. He saw a heart, tender and bruised, stitched together with light. It wasn't perfect, but it was unmistakably alive. Next to the painting, a handwritten card read, "The truest parts of us are never hidden by flaws. They're revealed by what we choose to share." People stared, some cried. One woman approached Anna and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's clarity." Later that night, after the exhibit closed, Michael helped Anna load the remaining pieces into the car. They didn't say much on the ride home, just held hands, the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. At home, Michael lit a single candle on the kitchen table. Anna poured them each a glass of water, and together, without needing to rehearse or explain, they raised their glasses to the flickering flame between them. "To honesty," Michael said. "To the kind that heals," Anna answered. That night, as they lay in bed, Anna asked a question that had been sitting quietly in her chest. "Do you ever miss that version of yourself, the one you pretended to be?" Michael turned toward her, his voice soft. "Sometimes, but not for the fame. I miss how brave he felt. It took me years to realize I could be that brave, as myself." Anna reached over, resting her hand against his chest. "You are. You always were. You just didn't know it yet." They fell asleep with the window open, the wind brushing gently through the curtains. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime sang. And in the quiet of that night, a chapter closed. Not with fanfare, but with fulfillment. They weren't perfect people. They had never claimed to be. But they were true. And in a world full of noise and artifice, that was the rarest gift of all. The sky was overcast the afternoon they pulled into the small town where their story had first turned real. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same faded awning, same creaky door that jingled with a tiny bell. But for Anna and Michael, everything had changed. They parked across the street. For a moment, they both just sat in the car. Michael glanced over, hand on the gear shift. "You sure?" Anna smiled softly. "Of course. This place. It's where the fairy tale ended, and the real story began." Inside, the restaurant was half full. Locals sipped coffee and shared weekend plans. A soft folk song hummed through the speakers. At the back, their table waited. Corner booth, window view, just like before. Anna touched the wooden edge of the booth, running her fingers along a groove in the varnish. "It still has that scratch," she whispered, "from where I clutched the table that night." Michael pulled out her chair, just like he had the first time. They sat, facing one another. No nerves this time, no masks. Just love settled like warm tea between them. A waitress approached, older now but still sharp-eyed. She squinted, then broke into a grin. "You two again," she said. "You were the quiet ones that night. I remember." She didn't touch her drink for almost an hour. Michael chuckled. "We had a lot to talk about." "Well, welcome back," the waitress said. "I hope it's less intense this time." After she left, Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope, neatly folded. Familiar. He slid it across the table with a half smile. "This time, I get to be the one with the surprise." Anna tilted her head, curious. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was a note, written in his handwriting. The same handwriting she'd memorized over years of online messages. "Would you still choose me?" Anna read it twice, then looked up. Her eyes shimmered. She didn't speak. She simply leaned across the table and kissed him. Soft, certain. Then she whispered, "Yes." 1,000 times yes. Michael let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. And outside, the clouds began to part. The kiss lingered like a punctuation mark, soft and sure. It wasn't the first time their lips had met, but in that moment, at that table, it felt like the first time all over again. Michael took her hand and pressed it gently between his palms. "I know I asked you once before, in a way that wasn't honest. I don't want this to ever feel like a redo. I just wanted to know that today, now, after everything, you still feel what I feel." Anna didn't let go. She held on tighter. "Michael, every story has a strange beginning. Ours just happened to start with borrowed words. But what matters to me now isn't how it started. It's that we're still writing it. Together." They ordered the same meals they had on that first night. Hers, roasted vegetable linguine. His, black bean burger with a side of fries. The waitress gave them a knowing wink as she jotted it down. Over dinner, they shared quiet laughter, small stories they'd never told each other, details from their childhoods, dreams they hadn't dared speak aloud. Every sentence peeled back another layer, not the illusion from 7 years of online conversation, but the truth they'd been building ever since. As the plates were cleared, Michael reached into his coat again. Anna raised an eyebrow playfully. "Another surprise?" she asked. He pulled out a folded napkin. Handwritten across it, in his familiar print, were a few lines. "We met through a name that wasn't mine. But I loved you in ways that always were. And today, under our real names, I promise, this is where I stay." Anna blinked, tears welling again. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "I wrote it the day we danced in the living room. You wore your red dress. I wanted to say something then, but I waited, I guess. I was waiting for this table." Anna folded the napkin carefully and slid it into her purse. "Then I'll keep this one too." They didn't rush. The restaurant started to empty. The sky outside had turned a soft shade of lavender and gold. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, Anna reached across the table once more and said, "This isn't just where it began. It's where I knew I was home." After dinner, they stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The glow from the restaurant windows spilled onto the sidewalk like warm light from a memory. Michael held the door open for Anna just like he had the first time, but now she looped her arm through his and leaned into him. The parking lot was quiet. Their rental car sat a few feet away, but neither of them moved toward it. Anna looked up at the stars. "Do you remember what you wrote to me once? The stars envy your stillness." I printed it and taped it to my mirror. Michael smiled. "I remember. I was sitting on my porch, watching the sky. I didn't know if you'd think it was too much." "I didn't," she said. "I still don't. I think that's when I started to fall for you, even if I didn't know who you really were yet." They walked down the street in silence for a moment, passing darkened storefronts and the faint smell of coffee from a closed cafe. It felt like the town had paused just for them. As they reached the corner, Michael stopped and turned to her. "I thought about not asking you to meet. I was afraid, not of rejection, of hurting you." "You didn't hurt me," Anna said softly. "You helped me remember what it means to be seen." He touched her cheek. "You helped me become someone worth seeing." They stood like that, holding each other in the soft glow of a street lamp, the kind of silence that feels more like music. Then Anna reached into her purse and took out the note he'd given her earlier. "I want to frame this," she said, "beside the red dress. Not because of who you pretended to be, but because of the truth you gave me once you stopped pretending." Michael nodded. "That's fair." She folded it gently and tucked it back, then stood on her toes to kiss his forehead. "Let's never stop coming back here," she whispered, "even when we're old, even when the staff changes and they forget our story." "They'll never forget," he said with a quiet smile. "I left them a 5-star review with a little poem attached." They laughed, and hand in hand walked slowly back toward the car. The restaurant behind them wasn't just a place anymore. It was a promise. A reminder that real love doesn't need to arrive wearing someone else's name. It just needs to show up with an honest heart. The table wasn't much, just a second-hand wooden slab they picked up from a flea market in Beacon, New York, but it was theirs, and tonight it became their studio. A pair of USB microphones sat at opposite ends, cords coiling like vines toward the open laptop. The glow from the screen lit up Anna's face as she adjusted her notes. Michael leaned back in his chair, nervous but smiling. "This still feels strange," he said, tapping the mic lightly, "like we're pretending to be podcasters." Anna grinned. "We're not pretending, we're just doing it our way." The podcast was her idea. It came to her one rainy afternoon as she organized their journals, the printed telegram messages, their shared reflections, old entries from before they met. So many people had written them after her memoir was published. People with invisible stories, wounds, healing, loneliness, and above all, hope. "What if we created something where it wasn't about going viral," she had said, "but about reaching the right people, people who just need to hear someone be honest?" Michael didn't need convincing. They called it The Honest Connection. It was simple. Every week, they'd sit down and share parts of their journey, things they'd learned about love, forgiveness, deception, and healing. Sometimes they'd read listener letters aloud. Sometimes they'd just talk to each other. Their first episode was shaky. Anna's voice trembled at first as she told her story about the village in Hungary, the quiet days of painting, the loneliness that used to cling to her skin like fog. Michael followed, sharing the guilt he carried for impersonating someone he admired. Not to deceive, but to feel seen himself. There was no background music, no high-end production, just the quiet click of a spacebar at the end of the recording and two people staring at the upload button. They didn't expect much. Maybe a handful of plays, maybe silence. But by the end of the week, the episode had over 70 downloads. By the next, it had crossed 200, and the messages began pouring in. A woman from Ireland wrote, "You put into words what I've never been able to explain. Thank you for showing me I'm not foolish for wanting connection." A man from Indiana messaged, "I've been pretending to be someone else online just to have a friend. Your story helped me stop." They read every message out loud, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, always humbled. Michael glanced at Anna one night after finishing an episode. "We're not famous," he said. "No," Anna replied softly. "We're something else." The second season of The Honest Connection came with no advertising, no studio upgrades, just more heart. Anna and Michael began recording in the evenings, after dinner, when the world around them had quieted down enough to hear what mattered. They took turns choosing themes. One week it was "Loneliness is not weakness." Another, "When sorry means starting over." One episode in particular struck a nerve. Titled "The Voice Behind the Screen," they spoke directly to people who had been misled by false online identities and to those who had created them. Michael opened that episode with something he had never shared publicly. "For the first few months, I thought I was doing something harmless," he admitted. "But it was the day Anna told me, 'You made me feel safe in a world that never did,' that I realized it wasn't harmless, it was sacred, and I had to become the man she believed I was." Anna reached over the table and held his hand. "And you did." Emails flooded in after that one, from women who had forgiven and from men who were still learning how, from teens who felt seen for the first time, from older listeners who said their hearts had healed after decades of silence. And though the download count was never in the millions, it was enough. They joked sometimes that the algorithm must have skipped them, but privately they were relieved. They never wanted to become famous, not for being broken, not even for being whole. They just wanted to be true. At the end of one recording, Anna set down her notes and looked directly into the camera. "I want to say something," she said, "to the woman who still believes someone out there could love her. To the man who thinks his past is too heavy to carry beside someone else. To the ones who got fooled. And to the ones who were the fool. She paused. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to show up honestly, day after day, word by word. Michael sat in silence, watching her with that quiet pride she had learned to treasure. That clip, just 43 seconds long, was reposted dozens of times across social media. A small quote card appeared online days later, with her words framed in a soft border of red. You don't need a famous name to make someone feel seen. You just need to stay. Anna had no idea where it started. It didn't matter. They had become something more than viral. They had become real. Later that year, they were invited to a small community center in Vermont to give a live talk. Just 20 seats, folding chairs, and a circle of strangers. There were no spotlights, no stage, just a handwritten sign taped to the back wall. Welcome, Anna and Michael. Speak from the heart. They did. Anna read excerpts from her journal. Michael shared the first message he ever sent as Keanu. There were tears, laughter. One woman stood up at the end and said, I used to believe I missed my chance at love. Now I wonder if maybe it's just late. Michael smiled and replied, Late still counts. From that night on, they called their podcast tagline, Late Still Counts. Their audience slowly grew, not in numbers, but in depth. One listener wrote, Your voices are like two hands reaching across my loneliness. Another said, I started listening to feel less ashamed. I kept listening to feel more human. In the quiet of their small apartment, Anna framed one last quote and placed it beside the podcast mic. It simply said, The truest connection isn't about who you are online, it's who you choose to be when no one's watching. That had become their compass. Fame never followed. And they were okay with that, because in a world full of noise, they had chosen honesty. In a world obsessed with stars, they had chosen to be lanterns. And every week, someone new found their light. A gentle spring rain tapped at the window as Anna sat curled on the couch, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. Michael was in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing a late breakfast. The quiet comfort between them was one of routine now, not of grand gestures or nervous silences, but of knowing glances and shared stillness. She glanced at her phone out of habit and saw a new email notification. The subject line read, You don't know me, but you saved me. Her heart skipped. She opened it slowly, not knowing what to expect. The message began. Dear Anna, I hope this isn't too forward. I live in Spain. My name is Rosa. For 6 months I was speaking to someone online who claimed to be Keanu Reeves. At first I thought it was a joke, but his words, they were so thoughtful. He told me I was beautiful, that I mattered. I started to believe it. Then, last week, he asked me for money. Anna's breath caught. She read on, her hands trembling slightly. I was ready to send it. I had the wire transfer form half filled out, but something told me to Google more stories. That's when I found you. Your video. Your book. I watched and read every word. I cried. I felt foolish, but also understood. Because of your courage to share, I didn't send that money, and more importantly, I didn't let shame swallow me. You saved me, Anna. You saved me. Thank you. Tears pooled in Anna's eyes before she even realized they were forming. She set the phone down gently and leaned back, closing her eyes. A quiet wave of emotion rolled through her, not one of triumph, but of quiet gratitude. Michael walked over, sensing the shift in the air. What is it? He asked softly. Anna handed him the phone. As he read, his jaw clenched ever so slightly, not in anger, but in something deeper. Recognition. A reminder of how easily kindness could be twisted, and how vital it was to fight back with truth. She's safe, Anna whispered, because of our story, our mistake, our healing. Michael sat beside her, slipping an arm around her shoulder. "That's more than we ever hoped for," he said. Anna nodded, her voice barely above a breath. "A life saved. That's enough to make the whole journey worth it." Later that afternoon, Anna sat at her desk with the letter from Rosa open beside her. Across from her sat her journal, the one she had used all those years ago, the one filled with messages she once believed came from Keanu Reeves. She flipped through its pages slowly, now with different eyes. The ink had faded, but the words still pulsed with life, the poetry, the confessions, the long exchanges of fear and hope. And though the illusion had long since dissolved, the meaning hadn't. What she once saw as heartbreak, she now saw as foundation. Michael entered quietly, holding a small box. "What's that?" she asked. He placed it on the table with a sheepish smile. "A thank you note from the students in my workshop." Anna opened the box and found a stack of handwritten notes from teenagers who had taken his digital empathy classes. Notes scribbled in pencil, colorful pens, and even crayon. "Thank you for helping me talk to my mom again. Now, I don't ghost people when I'm sad. I never knew the internet could be kind until you showed me how." Anna's throat tightened. She traced her fingers over the words. "They're so young?" "They're learning early," Michael said. "That's the gift." Anna stood and walked to the window. Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. The world looked fresh, rinsed, and new. She thought of Rosa in Spain, of all the people they'd never meet, whose lives might shift because of a moment of honesty, because of one story told bravely. "It's strange," she said. "We thought the story ended when the truth came out, but it didn't. That was just the middle." Michael wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What would you call this part, then?" She smiled, pressing her palms against his. "The part where we pass the light forward." They stood in silence as the sun warmed the glass. Anna closed her eyes and saw Rosa clearly. A woman at a bank, hesitating, choosing not to send that money, choosing herself instead, and in that small defiance, reclaiming something sacred. Hope. And Anna knew, without needing anything more, that her pain had not been wasted. It had become someone else's turning point. The next morning, Anna sat at her easel. A new canvas stared back at her, blank, untamed. She dipped her brush in red, the same red as the dress that once symbolized hope, illusion, and transformation. But this time, she didn't paint herself in longing. She painted Rosa. Not her face, she had never seen it, but the feeling. A woman standing in front of a closed laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes, the moment of pause, the whisper of doubt, the shift toward truth. Behind the woman, Anna painted a second figure. Not Keanu, not Michael, just a shadow with a hand extended forward, offering nothing but honesty. That was the new symbol. Not fame, not fantasy, but presence. Real, lived, earned presence. Michael entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He watched her work in silence. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's free," Anna replied. They stepped outside into the soft air of early spring. The porch creaked beneath their feet. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. Children laughed on bikes. Life rolled forward in its quiet, ordinary miracle. Anna reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was Rosa's message. She read it aloud, one last time. "You saved me." Tears came, but they were soft now, not of pain, but of understanding. Not all rescues come with sirens and spotlights. Some come from words written across oceans, from women brave enough to speak their truth. That night, they lit a candle. Not for Keanu, not for Michael. For everyone who had ever loved through a screen, for every person who had ever searched for connection and been brave enough to open their heart anyway. For those who got hurt, and for those who helped someone else not to. They placed the candle beside the glass frame that held the red dress. Anna leaned against Michael's chest and whispered, "It mattered. All of it." He kissed the top of her head. It did. The flame flickered in the quiet of the room, throwing shadows on the walls, but the light, however small, remained steady. And in that glow, the journey came full circle. Not because they had found each other, but because they had found purpose in what once felt like mistake. And in the end, that was the greatest kind of love. They sat under the old maple tree in their backyard, the kind of tree that grew sideways first, as if unsure, before rising upward with confidence. Its branches stretched like open arms, casting a soft shade over the couple on the bench below. Anna curled into Michael's side, his arm wrapped gently around her. The late afternoon sun flickered through the leaves, golden and quiet. "This isn't how I pictured my life," Anna whispered. Michael smiled. "Me neither." She let the silence settle between them. In the distance, wind chimes moved with the breeze. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. "But it feels right," she added. Michael nodded, his eyes fixed on the tree's highest limb. "I spent so many years pretending to be someone else. I didn't know how to just be me." Anna turned to him, her voice steady now. "But you became someone worth being, and someone worth loving." Their journey had taken strange roads, across oceans, through illusions, around grief, and toward forgiveness. The messages, the red dress, the moment of truth in a quiet restaurant, they had all led to this. Not to perfection, but to presence. Keanu Reeves had never spoken to them, not in person, not in voice. And yet, his kindness had echoed in every message Michael ever wrote. His humility had shaped every decision they made since. His values had become the compass that guided two strangers toward each other. "He's not in this story," Michael murmured. "But he is," Anna said. "Everywhere." They had once thought their love story began with fame, with mystery, with the idea of someone larger than life. But now they knew it had always been about something else. Honesty, redemption, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything except truth. Anna reached into her pocket and unfolded an old note, the very first message she'd saved. It wasn't signed Keanu. It wasn't grand. It was simple. "You matter." She tucked it between the pages of her journal and held Michael's hand tighter. In a world filled with noise, they had found peace in something quieter, something stronger, something real. And they knew, somewhere out there, someone was still waiting to believe again. Michael looked up at the swaying branches overhead, then closed his eyes. He took a breath, not the kind you take when you're tired, but the kind you take when you're finally home. "I used to think love was about being impressive," he said softly, "making someone admire you. But it's not. Love is about making someone feel safe to be exactly who they are." Anna leaned her head against his shoulder. "You made me feel that, even when I thought you were someone else." He reached for her hand again, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. "I didn't mean to start with a lie, but somewhere in those words, I found the truth. I found the man I wanted to be, and then I found you." The wind stirred the grass gently. Their backyard wasn't fancy. The fence needed painting. The swing creaked on its hook. But it was theirs. Built from truth, from apology, from rebuilding after heartbreak, from believing that sometimes the heart sees clearer than the eyes. A bird landed nearby, picking at the earth. Anna smiled at it. "I wonder how many people are still waiting for a message that feels like a miracle." Michael looked at her. "Then let's keep writing them." They had already started in their own way, through their podcast, their artwork, their story. Not because they wanted to go viral, but because they wanted to go honest. Anna picked up a notebook resting on the bench beside her. She turned to a blank page and began to write a new message. Just one sentence. "You are not invisible." She closed it gently and whispered, "Someone needs that today." Michael kissed her temple, then stood and stretched, offering her his hand. "Come on," he said, "let's make tea." As they walked back toward the house, Anna looked over her shoulder once more at the tree, at the notebook, at the moment. Then she turned to the camera, smiling through glassy eyes. "If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe," she said quietly, "because someone out there might be one message away from believing again." The frame lingered for a breath, then it faded to black. And on the final shot, a single photo appeared. Keanu Reeves, not posing, just smiling, a quiet, kind smile. Beside it, a small sign. "Be kind, always." The message wasn't just from him. It was for all of us.